Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to tell you how you can monitor Cisco ACI using external monitoring system, and in this specific case we will talk about Zabbix. So first of all, let's take a look at our agenda. We will start with discussing why you may want to monitor ACI externally. Next we will discuss available options for external monitoring. After that we will talk about REST API specifics. After that, I will show you everything you have to do in order to prepare for signature-based transactions. And finally, I will give you a real-life example how you can monitor ACI using Zabbix. And in this example, we will get all APIC faults and we will raise a problem when the number crosses specified threshold. So, let's get started. First of all, let's try to answer that question why you may want external monitoring. So ACI has lots of built-in monitoring tools. So in ACI we have health scores, we have faults, statistics, different kinds of graphs. So you can see health scores here and faults and different faults here. And I would say that ACI has a very good built-in monitoring system, but typically customers, they want single pane of glass for monitoring everything they have in terms of IT infrastructure. So they want to monitor DC networking, in this case it would be ACI. They also want to monitor other networking, for example campus, it could be DNA, branch offices, it could be SD-WAN. And obviously they want to monitor other infrastructure. Servers, I mean physical servers, hypervisors, applications, etc. etc. And as I said, in most cases, customers, they don't want to switch between different interfaces. So they don't want to switch between APIC, between vManage if we are talking about SD-WAN, or DNAC if we're talking about DNA. So they want single pane of glass where they will see everything. Where they will see DC networking, campus, branch, servers, hypervisors, applications. So in this case, we need that external tool where we'll combine all our infrastructure, where we will monitor all our infrastructure. So that's why you may want external monitoring. In terms of available options, in ACI we have call home. Again, this feature allows you to send emails when something happens inside ACI. We have classic methods like syslog and SNMP, but in this video we will talk specifically about REST API because I think that this is the method which gives you the best level of granularity in terms of what you can actually gather from ACI, and also gives you an opportunity to change something based on some event. Now, let's talk in more details about REST API. So first of all, every query, every request to APIC's REST API must be authenticated. And it's quite self-explanatory, I would say. So you don't want hackers or any malicious person to gather some data from APIC or change some data inside APIC without being authenticated. So every request must be authenticated. And primary authentication method in ACI uses username and password in order to obtain authentication token for subsequent requests. So what I mean here is that, first of all, we do authentication request, and it would be a post where we'll actually submit our username and password, and result of that request would be authentication token. And all our subsequent requests, it may be GET request to gather data or POST request to change something. We will put the token inside every single request. So we will put it here, we will put it here, we will put it here. So essentially the token provides authentication for subsequent queries, for subsequent requests. But implementing this method depends on monitoring system capabilities. Frankly speaking, I'm not an expert in Zabbix, so I haven't found the way how you can actually use this authentication method with Zabbix. Maybe it is possible, but I haven't found it. So in this case, it is simply not possible. again, as far as I understand. So you cannot establish that workflow, you cannot establish that script when you first of all authenticate and next you send your actual payload with a token. So again, if you know how to do this procedure in Zabbix, I'm pretty sure that it is possible using some custom scripts. Please put it in section with comments below this video. But anyways, if you do have some kind of monitoring system and you cannot establish that workflow, you can use another option, which is signature-based transactions. So in this case, for every request, we will calculate signature using PKI, private key infrastructure. And we will add that signature to the request as a cookie. So end result here would be that we have a single hard-coded request, which is always authenticated by design, provided that certificate is valid, obviously. So in previous method, we need at least 2 requests. Again, first to authenticate, next with our actual payload. With signature-based transactions, we need only single request, and we will add signature to that request, and it will be authenticated by design. So if we want to gather some information, we will send a single request. If we want to change something in ACI, again, we can only send a single request, again, provided that it is signed by our certificate. So now, let's take a look at configuration steps. So first of all, we need to issue that certificate. Next, we will have to create a user in APIC and we'll attach that certificate from previous step to it. Next, we will generate signature for our request. Next, we'll get user certificate distinguished name in APIC. Next, we will compile our request. Simply put, it will consist of generic REST API request plus 4 cookies. And inside these cookies, we will actually specify that we are using transactions. So we're using certificate authentication, and we will put our signature there. And before actually putting this request to your monitoring system, I would say you should test it using Postman or similar tool, because probably it would be more simple. And there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind when you deal with signature-based transactions. So first of all, this method relies on PKI. So certificate must be valid. So be aware or ensure that your APIC is in sync with your server or your laptop where you will actually issue your certificate. In sync in terms of time, obviously. Also, APIC user must have enough privileges to gather required data. So in most cases, read privileges is enough, but in some cases, and in our specific case with faults, we will give this user admin rights. And the problem here is that when you do not have enough privileges, APIC won't tell you where the problem is exactly. So your request will be successful, and it will simply return you empty data set. So APIC won't tell you that you do not have enough privileges. It will simply return zero data set, zero data. Next, your signature must be calculated for every request independently, and even a small change in the request requires signature recalculation. So if you want to gather all faults from APIC, you will have to calculate signature for this request independently. If you want to get all EPGs from your APIC, it will be a different request, and hence you will have to calculate signature for this request again independently. If you change something in that request, so for example, you add some filters to your EPGs, to your get all EPGs request, you will have to recalculate signature again, because technically this is a different request and hash for that request should be different. Your signature would be different. Also, payload for signature generation shouldn't have any extra characters like new line, whitespace, etc. The easiest way to achieve that would be to use echo-n command in Linux or macOS. And also be aware of feature limitations. They are described in ACI documentation, and I will show you right now 2 documents that you need in order to actually configure these things. So first of all, we have Cisco APIC REST API configuration guide, and somewhere in the middle, we have APIC signature-based transactions. So here we have all the steps. Generating certificate, generating signature, etc., etc. And also here we have guidelines and limitations. So please check them out before you actually start implementing this feature. And second document would be, it is located inside Cisco community, so Cisco APIC signature-based transactions, REST API using Postman. So this is more detailed guide where you will actually see step-by-step configuration. I will put both links, I will put hyperlinks to both these documents below this video in the description section. So now I think we are ready for actual configuration. And again, we will start with issuing our certificate. Okay, so let's start with generating our certificate. We will use OpenSSL, and here you can see my Linux machine. And we don't have any files in that directory. So we will generate our certificate. Here I will paste this command. Again, you can find this command in the documentation that I've just shown you. So here we will create our certificate, and here we also have our private key, which we will use later in order to actually sign our requests. Now let's see our certificate. We will do it again with OpenSSL command, and here it is. Let's copy the data, and now we go to our APIC. We go to admin section, and here we will create a local user. I will call it Zabbix, because eventually we will use Zabbix as our monitoring system. We have to specify a password. In security, we will select security domains all, and here we will add our certificate. I will call it Zabbix also, and here in data, we will paste certificate data. Click OK. Next, here we will add privileges. Again, in this specific case, we will add admin right privileges. And that's it. Next, we need to create a request signature. So we go back to our Linux machine, and we will use echo -n command in order to create a payload for our signature. So here, this is our actual request. So it is get, and after get, we will, without any white space, we specify API node class fold inst.json. So this is actually a request that you will use to get all folds from your APIC. We will redirect it to file called payload.txt. We will cat it. And please keep in mind -n option. Again, you shouldn't have any extra characters in this payload. You shouldn't have any new line character, any white space character, or anything like that. So again, the easiest way to achieve it would be using echo -n command. Now we will create a digest for this request. We will use OpenSSL digest command. And in this case, again, we'll use our private key in order to generate the digest. And finally, we will take our digest in binary form and we will transform it in base 64. Now we will see what we have here. And this line, it would be our actual signature, which we will put in our request. Now we will have to do one more step. So we issued a certificate, we created user inside Epic, we generated signature for our request. Now we need to get user certificate DN in Epic. So to do so, we will go to Epic, we will go to our user, we will select our certificate, and we will save it. We'll say configuration subtree JSON. We will open that file, and here we will search for DN. Here is our DN, and this is the value that we actually need. So we will copy it and put it right here. So now we are ready to actually create our request. Again, it will be generic request plus 4 cookies. So let's go back to our Postman, and we will use Postman to initially test that we did everything right. So here is our ACI signature based transaction. We will use get, we will use again API node class fault.json. This is what we actually specified as payload here. And now we have to add 4 cookies right here. So we will add new header to this request. We will call it cookie. And now we need 4 cookies to specify. So I will go back to our documentation. And we need this data. Epic request signature, Epic certificate DN, Epic certificate algorithm, and Epic certificate fingerprint. So I will paste all the data into Sublime. And now we need to provide our actual information. So Epic certificate algorithm and certificate fingerprint, we don't need to change it. So that is okay. Epic DN, we will change it. Epic certificate DN to the value which we extracted from our Epic. And here we will put our signature. So we'll go back to our Linux machine, copy the string, and we will put it right here. And this is our request. We will copy it, go back to Postman, and paste it right here as a cookie. Now let's try to execute this request. And here you can see that we actually get some data. So if we disable that header and send it again, Epic says that we need a web token cookie named Epic cookie or site request with signature. So this is what we actually are actually doing right now. So again, without that cookie, this request is not authenticated, it is not authorized, so we can't gather any data. And Epic tells it explicitly. If we enable that cookie and we send it again, we get our faults. So with that being said, our request is ready. So now we can go to our monitoring system, to Zabbix, and we can test. We can add this request to our monitoring system. So it would be our next step. So now we are ready to configure Zabbix. Again, I will tell it to you one more time. I'm not an expert in this particular monitoring system, so if you know a way how we can achieve the same result in an easier fashion, please let me know in the comment section below this video. So anyway, we will create a host in Zabbix. We will create an item with HTTP agent, and we will set type of information as text. And if needed, we will add JSON path preprocessing, and also we will add triggers, again, if needed. So now, let's switch to our Zabbix. Here it is. We will go to configuration hosts, and we will add our host. We will call it ACI, and we will assign it to discovered hosts. Now we go to items, and we will create an item. We will call it epic faults. Type would be HTTP agent, again because we're actually executing HTTP request. Key would be faults, and URL we will paste it from our Postman. Here we need to specify headers. Again, it would be cookie, and we will copy payload from Postman again, paste it right here, and finally we will change type of information to text. We will edit. We see that it is enabled. We will check it right now. We will go to monitoring, latest data. We will select our host. And here we need to wait till we actually get the data populated. We're still waiting. It will take, I guess, no more than 1 minute. I guess the default timer is 1 minute, and yes, we can see it right here. So we go to history, and we see our actual payload. So essentially, this is the same result which we got using Postman. Again, it may be this result may be sufficient for you, but in some cases, in our specific case, maybe you want to extract some specific data from this output. So in this case, we will check total count of our faults. To do that, we will add pre-processing for our into our HTTP agent. So we'll copy total count here. We'll go back to configuration, hosts, items. We select epic faults. We'll go to pre-processing. We will add pre-processing. It will be JSON path, and pattern would be total count. We will save it. We will check it one more time. Go back to monitoring, latest data, and when next request will be sent, we will actually receive only total count value. So we should receive only 17. So let's go back, and again wait 1 minute for new request. And now we get 17. So if we go back to history, again, these 3 requests, our 3 initial requests, first 3 initial requests, and here we can see our value, our total count value. Again, we achieved it using pre-processing. So this is the first thing we did with Zabbix. Our next step would be to add a trigger in order to generate a fault when the threshold of total number of faults in APIC crosses some value. So this would be our next step. And to do that, we will actually configure a trigger here. And before we actually configure trigger, let's go to monitoring and problems. And here we see only one problem with our Zabbix server. And in the dashboard, we don't see any high problems. So let's go back to configuration, hosts. We will add a trigger, create trigger. We will call it ACI faults. We assigned severity high, and here we will add an expression. Here we select item, which is APIC faults, and result would be, let's say that we raise that fault if value of that item is more than 5, which is true in our case. So we will insert this expression, we will add it, and now we have to wait. Again, we have to wait for one more request in order to see that problem generated. So let's go back to our latest data. Again, let's check history quickly. Again, we see a number of requests that have been already sent to APIC. Let's stay here on problems tab, and pretty quickly we see that we have one new fault. So we have high fault from host ACI, and problem is ACI faults. If we go back to our dashboard, again, here we see that we have new fault, and we see one high fault. Again, if we go back to our configuration, hosts, triggers, we see that we raise that fault if that number of that item is more than 5, which is true in our case. Again, because we actually get 17 here, and 17 is more than 5, obviously. So if we change it to 100, let's say, we update it, our fault should go away. So again, we need to wait till new request goes to the APIC, and we will see this fault disappear. Actually, it will be resolved. Now you can see that our problem is resolved. So it is green now. If we go back to our dashboard, we can see it right here, and we see 0 high problems. So that's pretty much it for this video. So again, we discussed how you can actually use signature-based transactions in order to supply external monitoring system with some data from APIC. So I hope this video was useful for you. If you like this video, please put a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Again, thanks for watching.